Good evening, class. Today we'll talk about the Battle of Alesia for the undergraduate online course, The History of Ancient Rome from 753 BC up until 476 AD. The Battle of Alesia was part of the Gallic Wars. Our, our ancient sources for this battle are Julius Caesar, Plutarch, Suetonius, and Frontinus. We should remember a few notable individuals who took part in this battle. On the Roman side is Julius Caesar, the commander. His officers, Mark Antony, the famous Mark Antony, was a couple with Cleopatra. Titus Labienus was another officer, and in the following civil war fought against Caesar. And Decimus Brutus, a young officer who was one of Caesar's assassins. From the Gallic side, we should remember the head of the Gallic rebellion, Vercingetorix, his cousin Vercingetorix, and Commius, a Gallic ex-ally of Caesar who fought against him in Alesia. The Gallic Wars started in 58 BC when the Gallic tribe of the Helvetii, located in modern-day Switzerland, attacked Roman territory, governed by Caesar. Caesar fought against the Helvetii and invaded Gallic territory to defend Gallic tribes that were allies of Rome. But as the war progressed, Caesar decided to conquer the entirety of Gaul, thus gaining fame and funds. In 52 BC, Vercingetorix gathered a large host of around 80,000 to 100,000 men and was located in Gregovia, a city in what is today central France. Caesar attacked Vercingetorix but was unsuccessful and decided to move south closer to Italy where supply lines were. Vercingetorix sent a cavalry detachment to cut off Caesar but was unsuccessful and decided to move to the city of Alesia. Alesia was a city on top of a hill with two rivers running by, and it was easily defensible. When Caesar neared the area, he understood that it was impregnable and ordered the construction of an encircling set of fortifications around Alesia. The first wall was 11 Roman miles long, equivalent to 10 modern miles or 16 kilometers, and had 23 towers. Vercingetorix sent messengers around Gaul to rally the tribes to war and come to Alesia. When Caesar heard of this from deserters and captives, he ordered a trench to be dug about 19 feet with perpendicular sides and two more trenches about 14.6 feet wide and deep. He filled the inner one with soil from the plain and used water from the river to fill parts of it. Behind the three trenches, he built a rampart riveted with palisades about 12 feet high. On top of the rampart, he built battlements, parapets with square openings for shooting through, and breastwork, wooden screens at breast height to protect the defenders, and large horizontal pointed strikes projecting from the joints of the screens to prevent the enemy from scaling it. To prepare for the arrival of the Gallic relief forces, Caesar constructed an outer fortification with the same specifications, but facing the opposite way as protection against the external attack by the relief force. It followed the most favorable ground and formed a circuit of 14 Roman miles, about 13 modern miles. As the fortifications were underway, Vercingetorix decided to allow the civilian population to exit the city to allow his troops more food until the relief force arrived. Caesar anticipated that move and gave strict orders to his men not to allow the civilians out of the fortifications, pressuring even further Vercingetorix. In the meantime, a Gallic reinforcement contingent reached and set up camp on a hill about a mile away from the Roman fortifications. They positioned themselves near the town the following day and attacked the outer Roman defenses. Simultaneously, the besieged Gauls attacked the inner fortifications, but the joint effort proved unsuccessful. Undeterred, the Gauls attempted a nocturnal assault the next day. Mark Antony mobilized troops from the distant forts to support their comrades. At daybreak, fearing a Roman counterattack, the Gallic relief forces withdrew. Vercingetorix, leading the besieged Gauls, faced delays as he had filled trenches dug by the Romans. Upon learning from the retreat of the Gallic forces, the besieged Gauls returned to the town. Recognizing a vulnerability in the Roman fortifications, the Gauls identified an exposed northern side of a hill. They positioned a camp with two legions. The Romans had positioned a camp with two legions, and the Gauls decided to take advantage of it. Vercisivellaunus, the cousin of Vercingetorix, as I mentioned, selected 60,000 men. We can call them the Green Berets of the Gallic force to attack the area. And while they marched there before dawn, they initiated their assault at noon. Vercingetorix launched a sally, targeting and perceived weak points of the inner fortifications. In response, Caesar dispatched Labienus with 6 cohorts of the cavalry to reinforce the defense of the vulnerable area. Additionally, Brutus was sent with cavalry cohorts to protect the inner fortification. Eventually, Caesar himself, leading fresh troops, joined the fray. The combined efforts of the Romans successfully repelled the Gauls' attack. Caesar, as he entered the fray, he wore a special tunic so his men can recognize him. And as he mentions, the combat was so close as the men had threw off their javelins and they were fighting with their swords. The ingenious move of Caesar was to move part of his cavalry out of the fortifications, and as the Gauls were pressing on the Romans, the cavalry came from the back, smashed in the rear of the Gauls, making them um, retreat. Many were killed and slaughtered. Um, Caesar mentions about 100 to 150,000 men that were killed, which modern historians don't agree with the number, but it was a great onslaught. Vercingetorix then moved into Alesia and had a council with all the leading chieftains of the Gallic tribes, and offered himself to be killed and then sent to Caesar to appease him or to surrender alive, of course. The Gauls decided that Vercingetorix should surrender alive, and the historian Plutarch has a beautiful description of how Vercingetorix got on his horse, wore his most shiny armor and his best weapons, went to Caesar in the morning, threw off all his weapons and armor, and sat on his feet and surrendered. Caesar decided to agree with the surrender of the Gauls, only with one condition: they would give up their arms, which happened. Then he 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 enslaved the Gauls, gave his soldiers some slaves so they can sell them and make a profit. Then Vercingetorix, Vesivellaunus was captured and they were moved to Rome, where after a few years the triumph of Caesar took place. They were paraded through the city and they were strangled to death. Julius Caesar is a controversial figure. He is viewed as a ruthless dictator or reformer who acted as a harbinger for a more secure age. During the Battle of Alesia, we see Caesar order his men to block civilians from exiting the city, applying more pressure to the fighting Gauls. After the battle, the captives were sold as slaves and the leaders were incarcerated and executed after Caesar's triumph. These actions, by modern standards, are viewed as barbaric. Personally, I believe that these actions were extremely harsh, yet were born out of military necessity, allowing Caesar to prevail and save his men. We should not forget ancient armies had an organized supply unit as modern armies have, neither the capabilities to support themselves, leading them to pillaging and to slave trade to sustain themselves. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer them. Thank you.